It is hard to believe how time passes and how the years fly by. I recall a number of years ago being an ambitious young student at Harvard Divinity School who was driving back from Massachusetts to put in 2 weeks at the Minnesota State Fair, to be there with my friends from 4-H and to be involved in the great Minnesota get-together. Some time has flown since those days, but I am still reminded of this one year in which I drove back and was having an incredible time with friends, and receiving the news blasted across the media in one evening that Princess Diana's life had been lost. It was in this same time frame that we also had the passing of another significant person in our world, Mother Teresa. In a sense, the princess and this pop. These two who lived very public lives, but in very, very different ways. And we went into mourning, but most of the mourning seemed wrapped up in this image, this understanding of Diana. As flowers lined London and as people gathered, I think there was truly a significance in her loss of life, but perhaps the greater significance that went unspoken was that loss of the dream. That someone who might be viewed as more common could rise up the ranks to being part of the royal family, to being known in newspapers around the world, to wearing incredible clothes and jewelry, recognition. Whereas Mother Teresa had lived this rather quiet life of service, of dedication, of writing, of speaking eloquently for the poor. And these two lives, both lost. We come into this space, and we are invited to think about who we are and who we are called to be. And many of us aspire to, at least in that dream state, that dreamed of reality, that we might be more like Princess Diana. That we might be taken from our places of common life and common living and lifted up, perhaps just for that moment, to hobnob with the political elite or to go to the New York openings of galleries in Soho. That we might go and be involved with some of these incredible things that are happening and to have riches at our disposal. Yet, as we come and we hear these texts today, we know that as Christians, we are refocused, changed, and challenged to not be wrapped up in images of glory and clothes and hobnobbing with the elite, but rather living lives of servanthood, of finding those corners of the world that are in need and reaching out, putting forth our hand, our shoulder, using our mind, living richly and deeply from the heart. If you are like me, however, you know that it's much easier to want to be like James and John in today's readings. I know that I get excited when I've gone to a press conference and Mark Dayton has showed up as governor of Minnesota, or someone like Chris Cluey is there on our side from the Minnesota Vikings. There's something wonderful about knowing that you're standing with those people, right? And I know that at those moments, Jesus is calling back to me and saying, you've got to let go. It's not about whether Governor Dayton showed up or whether Chris Cluey is there. The question is, are you living your life faithfully as a servant, as a witness to this gospel? This gospel of healing, of teaching, of caring, of standing on the side of the oppressed or the marginalized. Are you doing it for that reason? Because that is who we as Christians are called to be. And yet, it's easy to fall into those traps of wanting to be just a little bit more. Yet I'm also mindful that as we were talking in some various conversations about those people of faith that we remember and remember richly, the minds went to folks like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Mother Teresa, Oscar Romero, Martin Luther King Jr. All of these individuals who believed and believed deeply in what it means, what it has meant to be a servant, to live the gospel in service to others. The minds didn't go to those who are proclaiming glory, and limited glory at that. So today we are called to refocus, to hear again how we are being called. I know that there are those of you who sat at tables over the course of the last couple days and interacted with immigrant families. Some of you helped to translate. Some of you helped track down items that they needed for their household, whether a simple set of dishes or a bed sheets. I can't help but imagine how that felt in that moment. To not be surrounded by princes and princesses, but rather to be surrounded by people who had a deep need and who were touched in that moment by you hearing what they needed and lending a hand. Servanthood, an incredible gift. I'm also mindful of those who have been very, very deeply involved in our children's ministry. Those who are reaching out and caring from a deep place of concern that all of our children will be lifted up in a way that is loving and caring and reaching out to others here in this community and in places that we utilize like our camps, and saying that we want to know that all children are cared for deeply and profoundly. We often forget how vulnerable our children can be. And so to have those voices raised is significant. Last week, in my absence, you had a wonderful time celebrating Children's Sabbath. And I was sad not to be here because it is that sense of standing with those who are vulnerable. Standing with those that we want to leave a legacy of hope, of faith. Of inviting them to think about what it means to live their lives in service to the others who are here in the sanctuary, who are in their schools and in the larger community.